You picture a medieval army and you get something specific. Banners cutting wind, iron ranks moving across frozen ground, a king on horseback wrapped in furs, deciding the fate of kingdoms from a saddle. That image was built for you very deliberately. The reality was much harder than history taught you, because what actually determined whether an army survived a winter campaign and took a castle, or simply stopped existing in the field, was not the enemy they were marching toward, not the siege, not the disease, not the enemy at the gate, the ground. The ground beneath the body of every soldier who lay down in a January field was working against him with a physics that most modern people have never been told. And the soldiers who survived, the ones who came back from campaigns that buried their colleagues in frozen earth, used a technique that costs you exactly nothing to replicate tonight. The outdoor recreation industry in the United States generates more than $20 billion in gear sales every single year, according to the Outdoor Industry Association's annual Outdoor Recreation Economy Report. A significant portion of that revenue flows from sleeping systems, pads, mats, and insulated ground barriers engineered to solve the exact same problem medieval soldiers solved with what grew in the nearest field. Medieval soldiers paid nothing. And the reason you are only hearing about this now, the exact decade when the free version became inconvenient, is coming up in about 30 seconds. There is one specific decision medieval engineers made that separated the soldiers who woke at dawn from the ones who did not. Not the material, not the weather. One decision. It is coming up. The moment the commercial sleeping pad entered the market. The moment closed cell foam was patented and packaged for sale in the 1960s. The older solution did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it could not be invoiced. You cannot put dry bracken in a catalog. You cannot sell it at a markup. You cannot convince a customer to replace it every 3 seasons because the new version has a higher thermal resistance rating printed on the label. The average consumer spends between $40 and $300 on a sleeping pad alone, according to the retail pricing published by major outdoor gear retailers. That purchase repeats every few years. Kingdoms that could not afford the failure of the wrong approach did not struggle, died. Orderic Vitalis, writing in his Historia Ecclesiastica, completed around 1141 CE, documents the harrying of the North, William the Conqueror's winter campaign of 1069 and 1070 across northern England, and records the deaths of men not from battle, but from the conditions of winter field operation. Cold ground in January killed soldiers before the enemy had a chance to reach them. The ones who survived knew something, the ones who died did not. What the commercial gear industry understood, and what is worth saying plainly, is not a conspiracy. It is arithmetic. A technique that costs nothing cannot generate revenue. A technique packaged in closed cell foam and rated to minus 15 degrees can generate billions. The billing cycle simply did not have room for free. But here is the part the industry hoped you would never ask. Exactly how it worked, that is what comes next. This is not a new idea. The Roman military writer Vegetius documented the preparation of insulated sleeping surfaces and the selection of dry ground in his Epitoma Rei Militaris, written around 390 CE. That text was copied more than 300 times in medieval monasteries and royal libraries across Europe, making it the most widely distributed military manual in the medieval world, as catalogued by N.P. Milner in his 1993 translation for Liverpool University Press. Every serious military commander in medieval Europe either owned a copy or had read one. This was not folk knowledge passed around campfires. It was command doctrine written into the most circulated military text on the continent. The Byzantine military manual known as the Strategicon, composed around 600 CE and attributed to the court of Emperor Maurice, survives in full manuscript form and has been translated by George Dennis for the University of Pennsylvania Press, published in 1984. The Strategicon identifies ground preparation on winter campaign as a command-level survival concern, not a personal comfort choice, not something left to individual soldiers to figure out, but a military order issued at the same level as march formations and siege protocols. Medieval armies who ignored this did not struggle, died. Jean Froissart, writing in his chronicles around 1370 to 1400 CE, documents the winter campaign of Edward III of England and France during 1359 and 1360, what historians call the Rams campaign. Froissart records soldiers dying in the field not from French resistance, but from the conditions of the ground itself during one of the coldest winters of the 14th century. The English army had experienced commanders. They had provisions. They had wool and iron in numbers. What separated survival from death in those fields was preparation at ground level. You cannot sell a subscription to a field of bracken fern. You can sell a sleeping pad with an updated rating every 3 years. Not wrong. Inconvenient. Intact medieval field technique cannot be invoiced. A $40 closed cell foam pad can ship in 2 business days with free returns. What medieval engineers understood about this, and what you're about to replicate for exactly nothing, starts with one physical principle, so simple it fits in a single sentence. The ground steals your heat. Stop it. Here's the number worth holding. The Strategicon of Maurice documents winter campaigns in which armies of thousands operated across the Byzantine frontier in conditions where inadequate ground preparation killed men before contact with the enemy. George Dennis, in his 1984 analysis published with the University of Pennsylvania Press, identifies the Strategicon's winter preparation protocols as survival requirements issued at command level, not suggestions. Standing military orders, every single one of those soldiers solved this without paying anyone, without a bill, without a supplier, without a service contract. Modern campers spend $40 to $300 to replicate the same insulating effect. Medieval soldiers paid nothing. The physics has not changed by a single variable since 600 CE. It is available on the ground around you right now, and almost nobody is using it. You have seen this your whole life and just never connected the dots. You know how a cast iron pan holds heat long after you turn the burner off. That is because dense material stores temperature and releases it slowly. You have watched that happen every time you cooked. You know how a wool sweater stays warm even when it is slightly damp. That is because the fibers trap tiny pockets of still air between them. Air conducts heat very poorly. The sweater is not warming you. It is stopping the air from stealing your warmth. You have worn that your whole life. You know how stepping onto a cold tile floor feels brutal on bare feet, but a rug lying on the same floor at the same temperature feels almost warm by comparison. Same room, same temperature. The tile drains heat from your foot the way a drain pulls water, instantly and continuously. The rug does not. You have felt that distinction your whole life without anyone explaining it to you. The ground does what the tile does, but roughly 20 to 30 times harder according to the thermal conductivity values published in Fundamentals of Heat and Mass Transfer by Frank and Kropra and David DeWitt. Moist soil conducts heat away from your body at a rate far beyond what cold air alone achieves. Frozen soil is worse. Wet soil is worse still. This is why a sleeping bag rated to minus 20 degrees fails when you lie directly on cold ground. It was designed to trap air around your body. It does that very well, but it does nothing about what is happening beneath you. The continuous drain of your body heat through every contact point between your back, your hips, and the earth. That drain runs all night. By the hours just before dawn, when the ground has reached its coldest point and your body is burning the least fuel to compensate, the drain has been winning for 6 hours. The gear industry solved this with a pad, a valid solution, an expensive, recurring, replaceable solution. The medieval solution is to understand exactly why the pad works, and then build the same effect from what is already lying under your feet. Most people who try to replicate what medieval soldiers did get one thing wrong. It is the first step, and it is the difference between waking up and not waking up at all. Here is what you need. I want to be honest with you about every number. Dry plant material, bracken fern, dry heather, dry leaf litter, dry grass, or pine boughs with the needles still attached. Cost? Nothing. That is genuinely it. No purchase, no store, no kit to assemble. The medieval version of this technique requires exactly one thing that cannot be bought: the knowledge of what thickness actually does, what dryness actually means, and how to build the structure so it holds through the night. The gear industry never needed you to have that knowledge. They sold you the product instead, and the knowledge went with it. Most people who try this get one thing wrong. It is the first step, and it is the difference between surviving a night at minus 20 and dying from something that looked like bedding. Here is the one thing most people get wrong. They think the goal is to cover the ground. That is not the goal. The goal is to build a wall of trapped air. Plant material on its own does not insulate you. The air pockets locked between the stems and fibers are doing the work, the same principle that makes a wool sweater warm. Not the wool itself, but the still air the wool holds against your skin. The same principle that makes double pane glass warmer than single pane. It is the gap between the layers doing the insulating, not the glass itself. What you are building is not a mattress. You are building a barrier of still air between your body and the conducting earth. The moment that distinction clicks into place, every step in this process makes complete and immediate sense. Medieval armies, who did not understand this, built thin, flat layers of plant material and froze on top of them anyway, using identical bracken, identical heather, identical conditions, to the ones that kept their better trained counterparts alive through the same night in the same field. The material was the same. The geometry was wrong. Build it the way most people do. Thin, flat, gathered quickly without thought. And you get what the soldiers in Orderic Vitalis' Chronicle got. Build it the medieval way, and you get what the Byzantine field units got. A morning? Here is how to build it correctly. Step 1. Select the driest material you can find. Run a handful between your palms. Bone-dry plant material makes a light, papery crackling sound and snaps cleanly when bent against itself. That snap is the sound of fibers that have not retained moisture, fibers that still hold air between them, material that bends without breaking, that feels cool and slightly dense and heavy for its size, is still holding water in its cells. Set it aside entirely. Wet material collapses air pockets the moment your body weight settles onto it. Wet bracken lying on frozen ground conducts cold just as efficiently as the frozen ground beneath it. There's no step in this technique that rescues wet material. Dry is the entire first decision, and it is the decision most people rush past. Step 2. Build the layer to the depth of your forearm. From your elbow to your wrist, roughly 18 inches of loose material before compression. After your body weight settles on it through a full night, you will retain roughly 8 to 10 inches of compressed insulating depth beneath your core. That compressed depth in dry bracken or dry heather interrupts ground conduction with an effectiveness comparable to modern closed-cell foam sleeping pads in similar temperature conditions, based on the thermal resistance of loose-fill organic materials documented in building science research published in the journal Energy in Buildings. Lay the material in overlapping angles, not flat sheets stacked on top of each other. Overlapping angles, the way a thatcher lays straw on a medieval roof, angled and interlocking layer upon layer. Flat sheets compress into slabs under body weight and collapse most of the air gap within the first hour. Overlapping angles maintain a three-dimensional structure under sustained compression. That structure preserves the air pockets. It is geometry doing the work, not material quantity. The finished bed should extend slightly beyond your full body length and be wider than your shoulders by the width of a hand on each side. Step 3. The next step is the one most people skip. It is also the one that made the difference between a garrison that endured a full winter campaign and one that lost men to cold before a single battle was fought. Pack the edges upward. Your body is not flat. Under your hips and shoulders, your weight compresses the insulating layer harder than it does beneath your lower back or your calves. The edges, where your arm or hip rolls slightly outward during sleep, are where the air gap collapses first. Cold enters at the edges before it enters anywhere else. The Strategicon of Maurice specifies that soldiers build a slight raised perimeter around the body outline of their sleeping surface. Think of the way a bird's nest cups upward at the rim. That rim is not decorative and it is not for comfort. It seals the warmth pocket against the body through hours of unconscious movement. Push excess material up around your edges to the height of a closed fist. That raised wall catches the sides of your body and keeps the insulating layer sealed through the coldest hours before dawn, when the temperature drop is steepest and your body is burning the least fuel to compensate for it. Step 4. Test the layer before you lie down for the night. Press your palm flat against the surface and hold it still for a count of 5. Not 2. 5 full seconds. If you feel cold beginning to pull through before the count reaches 5, the layer needs more material, drier material, or both. Add to it. Repeat. You're looking for a sensation of neutrality, not warm, not cold, after 5 full seconds of contact. That neutrality is conduction being interrupted. Your palm is warm. The ground is cold. If the layer is doing its job, neither temperature reaches the other. 5 seconds of neutrality confirms the technique is ready. No thermometer, no gear. A palm and a count of 5. That is the field test. Step 5. Lie down and stay completely still for 2 full minutes before making any adjustments. This is the hardest step. Not physically, it asks nothing of your muscles. It is hard because the first 2 minutes feel wrong. The material is at ambient temperature, the same as the air around it. Your body heat has not yet accumulated in the air gaps beneath you. The initial sensation is cold, and cold feels like failure. It is not failure, it is the loading phase. 2 minutes is how long it takes for your body heat to begin building up in the trapped air beneath you. You will feel a distinct transition, a specific moment where the sensation shifts from cold being drawn away to warmth being reflected back. That transition is physical and unmistakable. When you feel it, the technique has fully engaged. Stay still, protect the air gap you built. The technique is now doing exactly what the Strategicon of Maurice prescribed to soldiers standing on frozen Byzantine frontier ground 1400 years ago. That transition is the technique. Everything before it is preparation. 1 unit of this sustains 1 person through 1 night. What a family of 4 does with 4 of them built inside a shared shelter. And what the Cistercian monks at Rievaulx Abbey did with the same principle, scaled across an entire living community working through English winters in the North Yorkshire moors, changes how you think about the whole problem. Rievaulx Abbey was founded in 1132 CE in one of the most exposed cold valleys in northern England. The community there, more than 140 monks at its height under Abbot Aelred, who led the house from 1147 to 1167 CE, managed their thermal environment deliberately and at permanent scale. Their dormitory floors incorporated raised sleeping surfaces above stone, creating an insulating gap between the sleepers and the conducting stone floor below, as evidenced in the standing architectural remains documented by English Heritage in their published surveys of the site. The principle was identical to the field technique in the Strategicon. Interrupt ground conduction, trap air, eliminate the drain entirely. Aelred of Rievaulx, in his Speculum Caritatis, composed around 1143 CE, describes the physical conditions of life at Rievaulx in terms that make the community's relationship to cold concrete and legible. These were not men indifferent to winter. They were men who had solved winter with the materials the North Yorkshire moors provided, permanently, collectively, at scale, and had built their architecture around that solution. 140 people, English winters, continuous operation across centuries. No bills, no infrastructure, no asking anyone's permission. There is one condition where this works less well. Medieval engineers knew it, and the way they solved it is the last thing in this script. Wind. If wind can reach the insulating layer while you sleep, the trapped air drains out of the material continuously throughout the night. It does not matter how thick the layer is or how dry the material is. Moving air strips warmth from porous material, the way blowing across the surface of hot soup cools it instantly, by replacing warm air with cold air faster than your body can rewarm the gap. The Strategicon of Morris addresses this directly in its winter campaign protocols. The text specifies that soldiers select ground with a natural windbreak, a hillside, a tree line, a wall, or shallow natural depression in the terrain, and orient their sleeping surface on the sheltered side of it, if no natural break exists. The Strategicon instructs soldiers to construct one from available material before building the sleeping surface. Cut branches stacked to waist height, a low ring of piled earth, equipment positioned upwind in a line. The windbreak was not optional, and it was not built for comfort, because a soldier who understood the physics knew that the insulation was only as effective as the air staying inside it. Moving air meant no trapped air. No trapped air meant the ground drain continued regardless of the thickness or the dryness of the layer. The windbreak comes before the bed. That is the sequence. Build the shelter for the air first, then build the bed for yourself. Medieval, verified. Free. The physics was always there. It was just waiting for someone to use it. Rievaulx Abbey still stands in North Yorkshire. The valley walls that shelter it have not moved. You can walk the dormitory floor where more than 100 people solved this problem without a single manufactured product, through winters that have not softened since Aelred walked the same ground in the 12th century. You can read his words in the chronicle he left behind. The Strategicon still exists in manuscript form in European libraries. Froissart's chronicles still document what happened to armies that got this wrong in the winter of 1359. Orderic Vitalis still records the names of men who froze in January 1070 before an enemy came near them. The physics has not changed by a single variable since any of those men put down their pens. What you built tonight does the same thing. I don't know what brought you here. It doesn't matter. It works either way.